In a peaceful corner of a land lived Adwoa, a girl of quiet beauty and quieter dreams. She had the kind of face that made people stop mid-sentence all among eyes full of wonder. But it was her gaze, always slightly distant, that marked her as different. People said she was born with her head in the clouds, always thinking, always watching. That evening, as the sun cast a golden hue over the thatched roofs and dirt paths, Adwoa sat alone on a woven mat near the river. Behind her, the village pulsed gently with the end of day bustle, fires being stoked, goats being led home, voices rising in laughter and song. But Adwoa sat still, mesmerized by the group of women at the river's edge. They were potters, hands dipped in clay, wisdom passed from mothers to daughters, pressing, smoothing, curving. The clay responded like a loyal friend, bending to their will. And to Adwoa, it was magic. She smiled a radiant smile, full of longing, full of wonder. But behind it was a tension, a silent ache. This was not her life, not yet. Her father, a farmer, believed a girl's worth lay in her obedience and in her eventual marriage. Her mother, though kinder, echoed the same ideas. But how could she not dream? When the river whispered stories and the hills seemed to hum with ancient songs, her gaze remained fixed on the potters, their muddy hands bringing beauty to life. She imagined her own hands someday, doing the same molding, shaping, expressing what words could not. In that moment, under the fading sun and the first glimmers of starlight, Adwoa made a quiet promise to herself. One day, she would shape more than clay the way she would shape her life. The following week, Adwoa couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped between two worlds. Every day, she went through the motions, helping her mother in the kitchen, practicing the duties expected of her as a daughter, but her heart was far from it all. Her secret visits to the potters by the river had become her only refuge. One early morning, after the sun had barely risen and the village was still sleepy, Adwoa set out alone. She walked quietly, her bare feet brushing against the soft earth toward the riverbank. As the cool breeze swept through the trees, it felt like a secret world that only she knew. The sounds of the water flowing, the birds singing, and the gentle tapping of hands on clay gave her a sense of peace that she couldn't find anywhere else. This time, she wasn't just watching. Adwoa had brought her own small lump of clay, determined to try shaping it herself. The potters noticed her, but this time, they didn't question her presence. An older woman, Amma, who had been making pottery for decades, smiled at her. "You have the hands of a true potter," Amma said softly, noticing the way Adwoa's fingers shaped the clay with such care. Adwoa blushed, her heart racing with excitement. "I've always wanted to learn," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Amma nodded. "Then you must be willing to put in the work. Pottery is not easy. It takes patience and dedication. But if your heart is in it, you will find a way." Adwoa spent the entire morning learning from Amma. With each turn of the wheel and each stroke of her fingers, the clay began to take form. The rough edges started to smooth, and the shape she created felt more like an extension of herself than just an object. She knew that this was her true calling. By the time the sun was high in the sky, Adwoa had made her first piece. A small bowl, uneven but full of potential. She gazed at it with pride, her hands still trembling with excitement. She had taken the first step toward her dream, despite the obstacles she faced. On her way home, Adwoa tucked the bowl under her arm, careful not to break it. Her heart was full, and she felt like she was finally walking the path meant for her, even if it was a difficult one to travel. But deep down, she knew her parents would not understand. She had to keep her new skill a secret, at least for now. The days that followed felt like a dream. Adwoa spent every free moment she had with Amma by the river, learning the intricate art of pottery. With each passing day, she grew more confident in her ability, and the pieces she created became smoother, more precise. She knew it wasn't perfect yet, but each bowl, jug, and vase felt like a step closer to something bigger. However, Adwoa's secret began to weigh heavily on her. Her parents were noticing her growing distance from the household tasks, and the silence around her felt suffocating. They hadn't directly confronted her about it, but she could feel their disapproval, even if they didn't speak it out loud. One afternoon, as she was working on a new piece, her mother called out from the doorway of their hut. "Adwoa, where are you? I need you to help me with the laundry." Her mother's voice echoed through the stillness. There was a slight impatience in her tone, a silent accusation that Adwoa had been slipping away from her duties. Adwoa's heart skipped a beat. She knew that the longer she stayed hidden with Amma, the harder it would be to balance her secret world with her family's expectations. She put the clay aside, wiped her hands on her apron, and made her way back to the house, trying to steady her breathing. As she entered the hut, her mother glanced up from her work, noticing the way Adwoa's eyes seemed distant, as though she had been somewhere else entirely. "You're becoming forgetful, Adwoa. A good daughter keeps her mind on the housework, not on the outside world," her mother said sharply, as if trying to pull Adwoa back into line. But Adwoa felt a fire burn inside her. She didn't want to be just the dutiful daughter, she wanted to be more than that. "I'm sorry, Mama," Adwoa said quietly, but her voice lacked the usual submissiveness. "But I've been learning something important, something that makes me feel alive. I'm not forgetting you or the house. I just need something more. I need to follow my heart." Her mother's face hardened. "Follow your heart?" she repeated, almost mocking. "You are a girl, Adwoa. You have your duties, and you should not waste your time dreaming. A good girl knows her place." The words stung, but Adwoa didn't back down. She stood tall, her gaze steady. "I am not just a good girl, Mama. I am me, and I will follow my dreams." For the first time, Adwoa saw her mother's eyes soften, but the unspoken pain in them was clear. Her mother had spent her life shaping Adwoa into a reflection of her own dreams. Adwoa's words had shaken her, perhaps because she knew she was slowly losing the daughter she thought she understood. Adwoa turned away, leaving the hut and heading back to the riverbank. The fire inside her burned brighter now, and it wasn't just for pottery, but for the freedom to be her true self. As the days went by, Adwoa could feel the growing tension between her and her parents. The once peaceful atmosphere in their home was now filled with silence and disappointment. Her mother barely spoke to her, and her father's stern gaze followed her wherever she went. It was clear that Adwoa's refusal to conform to their expectations had created a rift that seemed impossible to heal. Despite the coldness from her family, Adwoa couldn't stop her heart from following its path. Each day, she spent hours by the river, perfecting her pottery skills under Amma's watchful eye. Her creations grew more intricate and beautiful, but with every new piece, she felt a deepening divide between her life at the river and the life she was expected to live at home. Adwoa woke up with a sense of determination the next morning. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel the heavy weight of guilt hanging over her. The decision she had made was clear. She would continue pursuing her dream of becoming a skilled potter, but she wouldn't turn her back on her parents. She could no longer keep living a life divided between two worlds. She had to find a way to merge them. After the morning chores were done, Adwoa knew the time had come to have a serious conversation with her parents. She could no longer stay silent, letting the gap between them widen. She had to speak her truth. That afternoon, Adwoa found her mother sitting outside, washing clothes in a basin, her expression as distant as it had been for days. Her father was inside, reading one of the old texts that he always kept in the corner of the hut. Adwoa stood for a moment, watching them both, her heart pounding in her chest. It wasn't easy to make the decision to speak out, but she knew that if she didn't try, she would forever live with regret. She loved her parents, but she loved herself too, and that love had to be expressed. "Mama, Papa," she began, her voice soft but steady. "Can we talk?" Her mother looked up first, a faint frown pulling at her lips. "What is it, Adwoa?" Adwoa sat down beside her mother, her hands in her lap, trembling with nervous energy. "I know you both want what's best for me," she said quietly, her eyes meeting her mother's. "But I need to tell you something that's been in my heart for a long time." Her father, noticing the seriousness in her tone, closed the book and turned his attention to her. "What is it, Adwoa? You're acting strange." "I've been spending time with the potters by the river," Adwoa admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been learning to shape clay, to make bowls and pots. It's something that makes me happy. It's something I need to do. I know it's not what you expect, but it's who I am." Her mother stared at her face unreadable. "Pottery?" she said slowly, the word tasting foreign on her tongue. "That's not what I've raised you for. A girl like you should be preparing for marriage, learning to run a home, not wasting time with mud." Adwoa's heart clenched, but she pressed on. Mama, Papa, I don't want to waste time, but I also don't want to live a life where I'm not being true to myself. Pottery is more than just a skill to me. It's who I am. It's what brings me peace. There was a long silence. Her mother's face tightened, and her father simply stared at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and disbelief. You're a good girl, Adwoa, her father said after a long pause. But you have to understand, this is not the life we've planned for you. You have a place here, and it's not with the Potters. Adwoa stood up, feeling the weight of their disappointment press down on her. But she didn't back down. I know you want what's best for me, but I can't ignore who I am. I'm not just the girl you've imagined. I'm Adwoa, and I need to follow my heart. Her parents didn't respond right away. The air was thick with the silence of unspoken thoughts, the rift between them deepening with each passing moment. Adwoa had done what she could to explain herself, but she knew it would take time for her parents to understand. She turned and left the hut, her mind swirling with a mix of fear and hope. She had taken the first step toward change, but the road ahead would not be easy. One evening, while Adwoa worked on a new vase, her father approached her at the riverbank. His presence startled her, and for a moment she wasn't sure what to expect. Her father had always been the pillar of authority in the house, and seeing him standing there now so far from his usual place of control made her heart race. You've been coming here every day, Adwoa, he said quietly, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. Your mother is worried. I'm worried too. Adwoa didn't look up immediately, feeling a mix of hope and fear surge within her. This could be the moment where everything changed or where it all fell apart. I know you don't understand, Papa, she said, her voice trembling, but this is what makes me happy. I want to learn. I want to become something more than what you've planned for me. Her father was quiet for a long moment. The river flowed beside them, the only sound in the still evening air. Then he sighed, sitting down beside her. For the first time he seemed to look at her not as his daughter to be molded, but as the woman she was becoming. I didn't want to admit it, but I see something in you, Adwoa, he said, his voice low but firm. Something that goes beyond what I understand. I wanted you to follow the path I've set for you because I thought it was the best way to protect you, to give you a good life. Adwoa's heart fluttered with hope. Could her father really be starting to understand? But, he continued, his tone shifting slightly, pottery is hard work. It's a life of struggle. Do you understand what you're getting into? You'll face challenges that most women never do. Your beauty will fade, but the struggle will remain. Adwoa nodded, her gaze fixed on the pot she was working on. I know it won't be easy, Papa, but I'd rather struggle doing something I love than live a life without purpose. Her father's face softened, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes. You're my only daughter, Adwoa. I wanted more for you. I want more for me too, she replied, looking up at him. I want to be myself. I want to be more than just a pretty face. I want to leave something behind that will matter. Her father fell silent again, his hand resting on his knee, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, but it wasn't the cold, tense silence of before. It felt like something was shifting slowly, but surely. Finally, he spoke. I don't understand it fully, but I'll support you. You'll have to prove yourself, Adwoa. I won't just give you everything, but if this is truly what you want, you'll have my blessing. Adwoa's heart soared. This was the first step toward the reconciliation she had hoped for, the first sign that her parents were beginning to see her, not as the daughter they had imagined, but as the woman she was becoming. Thank you, Papa, she said softly, a tear slipping down her cheek. I won't let you down. The days after her conversation with her father felt different. There was a new air of understanding between Adwoa and her parents, though the journey toward full acceptance was still far from over. Her father's support meant more to her than she could express, even though she knew he still held doubts about her future. But for now, it was enough. For the first time in weeks, Adwoa felt a sense of hope blossoming in her chest. As the weeks passed, Adwoa's life began to change. She divided her time between helping her mother at home and spending hours by the river with Amma, learning more about pottery. Her skills grew with every piece she created. The bowls, vases, and jugs she shaped began to take on their own personality. each one a reflection of her inner strength and determination. Amma, ever the patient teacher, recognized Adwoa's growth. "You're ready," she said one afternoon as they sat by the fire, drying their clay creations. "Your hands have learned the craft, but your heart has also found its place. You're no longer just making pots, you're telling your story with every piece." Adwoa smiled, her hands covered in clay as she worked on a particularly delicate bowl. "I feel it too, Amma. Pottery has become more than just a craft. It's a way for me to express who I am, to show the world my strength." Amma's smile was proud, and for a moment Adwoa felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. However, the road ahead was not without challenges. Though her father had offered his support, her mother still struggled to accept Adwoa's decision. She spent her days in silence, doing the chores without saying much to her daughter. It was clear that she wasn't ready to fully embrace the path Adwoa had chosen. As the weeks turned into months, Adwoa's pottery began to gain more recognition in the village. The local traders who had once looked at her work with skepticism were now taking notice. Her pots were becoming sought after, and the people of the village admired the intricacy of her designs. Her hands, once hesitant, had become confident, shaping clay into beautiful pieces that told her story. But despite the growing success, Adwoa knew that she had to face a much deeper test. Her relationship with her mother still remained strained. The sun was bright and the air warm as Adwoa walked through the bustling market square. It was market day, the one day of the week when the village came alive with activity. Traders set up their stalls, selling everything from fresh produce to handmade fabrics, and the air was thick with the sounds of haggling and laughter. For Adwoa, it was more than just a day to shop, it was her day to showcase her pottery. She had been working hard in the past few months, creating new pieces that she hoped would catch the eye of the traders and villagers. Her pottery had become more than just a personal passion. It had turned into a business. The satisfaction of seeing people admire and purchase her work filled her with pride. Every time someone picked up one of her bowls or vases, it was a reminder of how far she had come, of how much she had fought to follow her dream. As she set up her stall, placing her creations neatly on display, she noticed a few familiar faces wandering past. Some of the villagers had become regular customers, often coming back for new pieces. Adwoa felt a surge of gratitude toward them. They had given her the opportunity to prove herself, to show that she was capable of more than just being the daughter of her parents. But the real test of the day would come when her mother arrived. Adwoa knew that her mother had never fully embraced her pottery, but this was the first time she would see it in the market among the other goods. It was an important moment, one that could either strengthen their bond or pull them further apart. As the morning sun climbed higher, Adwoa spotted her mother walking toward the market, her expression unreadable. Adwoa's heart skipped a beat. It was the first time her mother had come to see her work in public, and she could feel the weight of the moment hanging between them. "Mama," Adwoa called, her voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Come and see what I've made." Her mother smiled faintly, but didn't speak at first. She wandered over to Adwoa's stall, her eyes scanning the pottery. There was a hint of surprise in her gaze, but also something deeper. Something that looked like pride, though she didn't say it aloud. "These are nice," her mother said finally, her voice soft but sincere. "You've worked hard, I can see that." Adwoa's heart soared at her mother's words, but she didn't let herself get carried away. She had learned that her mother's approval would not come easily or quickly. She would have to be patient, continuing to prove herself through her work and dedication. As the day wore on, more villagers stopped by to admire Adwoa's pottery. Her hands were busy, shaping and polishing the pieces, but her heart was focused on her mother. She could feel her mother's gaze following her, watching her every move. Every so often their eyes would meet, and in those fleeting moments, Adwoa felt a silent understanding pass between them, a quiet recognition of how far they had come. At one point, a trader came by, examining a particularly beautiful vase. "How much for this one?" he asked, his eyes twinkling as he appraised the piece. Adwoa hesitated for a moment, and then named a price that she had thought long and hard about. It was higher than she had ever charged, but she knew her work was worth it. The trader raised an eyebrow but nodded, reaching into his pouch to pay her. As he walked away with the vase, Adwoa's heart raced. She had just made her first significant sale, and it felt like a victory in more ways than one. Her mother, watching all of this quietly, walked over to her. "You did well today, Adwoa," she said, her voice filled with a softness that Adwoa hadn't heard in a long time. Adwoa smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "Thank you, Mama. I couldn't have done it without your support." Her mother's gaze softened, and for a brief moment Adwoa saw something that she had been waiting for. Her mother's pride. It wasn't loud or extravagant, but it was there, in the way she stood beside her, in the way she looked at her with newfound respect. "You've shown me something, Adwoa," her mother said quietly. "I may not fully understand it, but I see now that this is what you were meant to do." Adwoa's heart swelled with gratitude, and she knew that this moment was a turning point. It wasn't the end of her journey, but it was a step toward something new, toward a future where she could be herself, fully and completely. The success of the market day lingered in Adwoa's mind for days, giving her a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt before. Her mother's pride had been a quiet victory, but it was a victory nonetheless, and Adwoa felt it like a warm glow in her chest. It was the first time her mother had seen her as more than just a daughter. She had seen her as a woman, a businesswoman with a craft that had value. However, despite the positive changes in her relationship with her mother, Adwoa knew that doubt still lingered in her heart. The path she had chosen was not an easy one, and the challenges of the world beyond the village were beginning to make themselves known. As the days passed, her pottery began to sell more frequently, and Adwoa was invited to showcase her work at neighboring villages' markets. It was a sign of her growing success, but also the start of new challenges. As the days passed, Adwoa found herself on a path that seemed both rewarding and overwhelming. Her pottery was thriving. People from neighboring villages sought out her pieces, and her reputation as a skilled potter was growing. Yet, with each success came the realization that the cost of pursuing her dreams was not always measured in money or acclaim. There were personal sacrifices that weighed heavily on her heart, and she had to confront them head-on. Adwoa's relationship with her family remained a work in progress. Her father, though supportive, still had his doubts about the sustainability of her work. Her mother, despite her quiet acceptance, remained distant, and Adwoa often felt the sting of her absence in her emotional life. Her mother's pride was not enough to heal the years of tension between them, and Adwoa found herself torn between wanting to prove herself to her family and the growing desire to pursue her own dreams. In the following weeks, her conversation with her father, Adwoa noticed a shift in the village. There was a new energy in the air, a subtle tension that seemed to grow each day. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but the whispers in the market, the cautious looks from some of the traders, and even the sudden coldness from a few of her longtime customers confirmed that something was changing. The very thing that had once been a source of pride, her success, was now becoming a source of unease for some people. It was the day after a heavy rainstorm that the trouble began. The skies had cleared, leaving the air fresh and cool, but the storm had left behind more than just wet earth. It had stirred up old resentments and fears. Adwoa had gone to the market to sell her latest pottery, but as soon as she arrived, she sensed something was wrong. A group of women from the neighboring village gathered near her stall, whispering among themselves. They were traders who had once bought her pieces, admiring her skill and dedication. Now their eyes were filled with something else: suspicion, even hostility. Adwoa greeted them politely, but the silence that followed her words made her uneasy. "We heard your pottery is getting expensive," one of the women said sharply, her voice edged with an accusation. "You think you're too good for us now, don't you?" Adwoa was taken aback. She had never imagined that her success would stir up such animosity. "It's not about being too good for anyone," she replied calmly. "I just charge what my work is worth." Another woman, her face hard, added, "You've forgotten your roots. You come from nothing. Who do you think you are, charging such prices? You're no better than anyone else." The words stung, and for a moment Adwoa felt the familiar weight of doubt creeping into her heart. She had always known there would be challenges, but she hadn't expected this kind of hostility from people she once considered allies. But just as the conversation was starting to escalate, Amma arrived. She had been watching from a distance, and now she stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "Adwoa," Amma said, her voice firm, "you don't owe anyone an explanation for the value of your work. You've earned every coin, every praise, and you will continue to do so." The women looked at Amma, but there was a certain respect in their eyes that softened their hostility. Amma was known for her wisdom and strength, and her words carried weight. Adwoa took a deep breath, feeling the tension in her chest ease. She had been ready to defend herself, but Amma's calm and steady presence had reminded her that she didn't have to fight alone. "The problem is not the price of your pottery," Amma continued. "It's fear. Fear of change, fear of success. You're doing something new, something women before you didn't do, and that scares people. But that's their problem, not yours." The women hesitated, and after a moment of uncomfortable silence, one of them spoke again, this time softer. "Maybe we overreacted. It's just things have changed, and change is difficult." Adwoa nodded, understanding. "I know," she said gently, "but I'm not changing who I am. I'm just building a future for myself, one piece at a time." The women exchanged glances before nodding reluctantly. Slowly, they walked away, leaving Adwoa and Amma standing together at the stall. Adwoa's life had changed in ways she hadn't anticipated. The pottery that once seemed like a solitary pursuit had now become a source of community, conversation, and sometimes conflict. Her success had brought admiration, but it had also attracted the harshest of critics. While her pottery continued to thrive, the growing attention was beginning to feel more like a weight she couldn't escape. As the weeks passed, the tension that had once hung over Adwoa began to fade, though the lessons she had learned from it remained. She had faced the storm of her own ambitions, the criticisms of her community, and the expectations of her family. But now, standing at the edge of her journey, she could see more clearly than ever before her dreams were not just about pottery. They were about proving to herself that she could create her own destiny, no matter the obstacles. One day, a letter arrived from a distant city. The letter was from a prestigious gallery that had been following Adwoa's work for months. They were impressed by her skill and vision, and they wanted to showcase her pottery in an exhibition that would reach buyers from all over the country. It was an opportunity that few artisans ever received, a chance to elevate her work to a national stage. When Adwoa read the letter, she felt a surge of emotion, excitement, disbelief, and even fear. This was the moment she had worked so hard for, the chance to prove to the world that her dreams were valid. But with it came a new challenge. How would she navigate the pressure of such a big step? Would her community accept her newfound recognition, or would they feel abandoned? As she sat in her workshop and staring at the letter, she realized that the path forward was hers to shape. The decision would not be easy, and she would have to consider the needs of her family and her village, but for the first time, Adwoa understood that she had earned the right to follow her dreams. Later that evening, she went to her father's hut. It was a quiet, peaceful night, and as she sat with him, the familiar sounds of the village filled the air. She shared the news of the exhibition, the excitement in her voice palpable. Her father listened intently, his expression thoughtful. After a long pause, he spoke. "I'm proud of you, Adwoa. I can see that you've worked hard for this, and I understand why this is important to you. But remember, the world outside can be overwhelming. You have to stay true to yourself, to the values you hold dear." Adwoa nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. Her father's approval meant more than she had ever realized. "I know, Papa. I'll never forget where I came from, or the people who supported me. But I also have to take this step. I have to see where it leads." Her father smiled, a deep approving smile. "Then go, Adwoa. Go and show the world what you're made of. But never forget that no matter how far you go, you will always have a place here. You will always be my daughter." The next morning, Adwoa gathered her pieces of pottery, carefully packing them for the journey. She was nervous, yet filled with anticipation, knowing that this was the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She had worked hard to build her name, but now she was ready to let the world see her vision, to showcase the work that had brought her so much pride. Before she left, she visited Amma. They sat together, the two of them sharing a quiet moment as they looked out over the village. Amma had been her constant support, the one who had believed in her from the very beginning, and now it was time for Adwoa to take that final step. "You've come so far, Adwoa," Amma said, her voice filled with pride. "I've always known you were meant for something great. Go and make it happen." Adwoa smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. I will, and no matter where this journey takes me, I'll always carry the village, my family, and you with me. The road ahead was long, and Adwa knew that the challenges wouldn't stop. But she also knew that she had the strength to face them. She had built this dream from the ground up, one piece of pottery at a time, and no matter how far she traveled, she would never lose sight of who she was. As she left the village behind, the sun began to rise, casting its first golden rays over the horizon. It was a new day, and with it, the promise of a future that was hers to create. Adwo had learned the most important lesson of all, that success was not about conforming to the expectations of others, but about staying true to herself. And in that truth, she found freedom.